Welcome everybody to the New York Daily News' NFL preview. This video is the Giants' all-time top 10 players list, voted on by Eb Samuel, Hank Gola, myself, Ralph Vacchiano. Gary Myers also joined in the voting. And Hank, will start right away with number one. Pretty much a mind-numbingly no-brainer as far as who's going to be number one on this list.
I think so. He transformed not only the Giants, but he transformed football. Brought the 3-4 into vogue. And we're talking about Lawrence Taylor, right? We should mention.
Yeah, of course, exactly. Yeah. And as if nobody knew that Lawrence Taylor was going to be number one. He's one of the greatest NFL players of all time.
He's probably the best defensive player of all time. I mean, the guy had it all, and he just brought a new athleticism to the position. He was not only a pass rusher, he could drop back in pass coverage, he could stop the run, and the Giants just basically built their defense around him. He was their main weapon, Parcells and Belichick, and they could cook up every scheme around him.
And Eb, I know you didn't cover Lawrence Taylor, but you certainly know that pretty much every NFL linebacker nowadays is compared to him, and we're constantly looking for who's going to be the next LT.
Exactly. I mean, Clowney, is he the next LT? It's always kind of about, you know, Lawrence Taylor is the measuring stick. He's the measuring stick when you talk to scouts. He's that dominant pass rusher.
He was really a scary guy, and I grew up watching him. I only covered him right at the end of his career, but what amazed me was you always knew where he was on the field. You also knew the offense always knew where he was on the field. He was the one guy that scared the heck out of every other team.
Yeah, the offensive coordinators would have their hands full each week trying to devise a way to defend him, and he not only just his presence out there alone. I mean, there were other things that they could use to play off him. Other players were made so much better because of what he could do on the field. So far and away, not even question, he's number one.
That was an easy choice for us at number one, but what made the rest of this list difficult is the Giants are loaded with players who are in the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame, so it's tough to narrow down which Hall of Famers are better than the others, but we gave it our shot. So we're going to go right down the list from you. We gave you number one. We'll go now through 2 through 10. We'll start with number two. Number two on the list was an offensive tackle, the second greatest player in Giants history, an offensive tackle, Rosey Brown, and one of the most dominant linemen, and a 27th round draft pick, which is amazing.
Probably the all-time greatest sleeper in draft history. They got him out of Morgan State, and basically back in the day there wasn't much scouting, but they saw his name on a list of black college all-stars, and they thought they'd take a shot at him. Brought him to camp. He showed up in Wisconsin. That's where their training camp was, dressed in a suit with a little briefcase, and basically thought he had made the team. Didn't know that there were cuts to be made, and he just kept impressing and impressing. Just a great offensive lineman. Have you ever heard of a pulling tackle? Well, he was a pulling tackle. He'd get out there and lead running plays around the other side. I mean, kind of an undersized guy, but quick as anything.
When you hear his size, he was incredibly undersized, even for that era. You know, you think of the tackles now, 300-pound guys. He was in his, 240s or something, I think it was?
255, I think was what he played his tops at. But, again, in pass protection, there was the 1956 championship game. He was one of the outstanding players in that when the Giants routed the Bears, their last championship before the '86 team, and he was responsible for the Bears' defensive end. His guy's name was Ed Meadow, and he was just a fierce pass rusher. And Rosey Brown hit him across the face in the first series, and never heard from him again.
Number three on our list is another offensive lineman, as well as a few other things. Mel Hein, a center, played for the Giants in the 30s and 40s, actually an NFL MVP from the center position, which is amazing in itself and worthy of being this high on the list.
Leather helmet days, played both ways. Amazing thing about Mel Hein, never missed a down. Never missed a down, offensively or defensively.
Absolutely incredible durability, one of the original 60-minute men in the league. Number four on our list, a very famous name to a lot of you, Michael Strahan, possibly the greatest defensive player that I ever covered, the greatest pure pass rusher. Again, I didn't cover Lawrence Taylor except for 1 year, but even better than that to me, maybe the best two-way defensive end I've ever seen, a guy who could stop the run as well as he could rush the passer and really became a great leader later in his career.
And a guy who I actually watched, the first guy on the list who I actually watched, what always amazed me about him is just the fact that he was powerful and strong, but then you looked it up and he was only 250, 260 pounds. He was playing so light, but yet able to manhandle these offensive tackles.
Number 5 on our list, we go back a little ways to another defensive end, Andy Robustelli, who was in an era before there were sacks, would have had a ton of them if they kept count back then, and probably one of the greatest pass rushing defensive ends of his time, which included an NFL championship for the Giants.
Yeah, he's the reason. One of the reasons that the fans were chanting defense, defense. He got it all started. Another undersized guy, but quick as anything and very smart.
Number 6 on our list, Frank Gifford, one of the most famous Giants of all time, a halfback, a flanker, and a guy known for being a triple threat. He could run, he could catch, and he could throw the ball pretty well too.
He actually made the Pro Bowl at 3 different positions: defensive back, running back, and wide receiver. Had to go out to wide receiver after Bednarik smeared him, but certainly one of the most versatile players in Giants history.
Number 7 on our list is a man who is one of my favorite Giants of all time and maybe the most intimidating human being that I've ever met, linebacker Harry Carson. And, you know, he was known as being a ferocious hitter. What I remember most about him, especially in the stories that I hear from former Giants, is his leadership. That locker room, they were scared of him. They did what he said.
He was one of the most imposing men I've ever come across. He could just look at you and you'd melt. But, you know, he knew it all. He started when the Giants' defense was pretty terrible and ended up winning a Super Bowl with them. So that's why he was such a great leader. He had all that experience.
Number 8 on our list, a forgotten man sometimes in Giants history, but maybe their best defensive back of all time, Emlen Tunnell, who was considered the Giants' offense on defense. And a stat that I find fascinating, in 1952, he had more return yards, interceptions, and kickoff and punt returns than the rushing leader had rushing yards.
You didn't see defensive backs returning interceptions back in the day, but he did. He was offense on defense. And when Lombardi left the Giants to go to the Packers, he took him along and helped build the Packer franchise in Green Bay.
Number 9 on our list, the only non-Hall of Famer on our top 10, although who knows, in a few years that could change, quarterback Eli Manning. And I know he's probably one of the more controversial guys on this list, especially we can go to top 20, and there are some people who would argue about that. You can't argue with 2 Super Bowl rings and 2 Super Bowl game-winning drives.
And 2 of probably the biggest plays for the Giants in Super Bowl history, with the great throw to Tyree, the great throw to Manningham. I mean, he's performed.
Number 10 on our list, the last guy to make the cut, one of the ferocious hitters in NFL history, a linebacker, Sam Huff, played for the Giants 1956 to 63. Again, one of those guys that really made this franchise's defensive history.
Again, they would match him up against Jim Brown all the time, and those would be some violent collisions. They did that little series on him, The Violent World of Sam Huff, and it was. When they got rid of him to the Redskins, it wasn't a very popular move around here.
It's amazing. We could do this list and probably get 20 guys that would fit onto the top 10. We had to keep it to 10, though. I hope you enjoyed the list, and make sure you read our story on this top 10 list at nydailynews.com.